Tom and Jackie Hawks were living the retirement dream of sailing the Pacific on their own yacht. But with grandkids on the way, it was time to sell their floating paradise and bring their journey ashore. What should have been the end of one chapter and the start of another led them straight into treacherous waters. This is Monsters. Tom and Jackie Hawks had the kind of love story that made you believe in soulmates. They met in the late 1980s at a chili cook-off and hit it off right away. Tom was an ex-military firefighter and retired probation officer with 2 young sons from a previous marriage. Jackie's first husband had died in a motorcycle accident that had left her with injuries which required her to use a wheelchair, but Jackie's physical limitations never bothered Tom. Instead, he saw her for the vibrant and adventurous person she was. Jackie and Tom fell in love hard and fast. Her injuries meant she couldn't have children, so she treated Tom's sons, Ryan and Matt, like they were her own. In time, they started calling her mom, and they took pride of place at Tom and Jackie's wedding in 1989. By then, Jackie had recovered enough from her injuries to have regained her independence. The couple decided that life was something to be fully lived. You never really know what's around the corner, and they didn't want to waste a single moment. In 2002, after years of hard work, they sold their home and bought a 55-foot yacht named Well Deserved. The name couldn't have been more fitting. They had both worked tirelessly to build a life together, and now they were going to enjoy every second of it. Prior to moving on to the yacht, Tom and Jackie lived in Prescott, which is located at the northern edge of the Bradshaw Mountains, 90 miles or 144 kilometers out of Phoenix in Arizona. Given that the nearest ocean is more than 350 miles or 560 kilometers away, their dream of living on the open sea was all the more extraordinary. But Tom and Jackie took to life at sea like seasoned sailors. They sailed up and down the Pacific from San Diego to Mexico's Sea of Cortez, stopping at beautiful coastal towns and soaking in the freedom that came with living on the water. As they traveled, they worked their way through a never-ending list of improvements to make Well Deserved completely self-sustainable. They installed a state-of-the-art GPS system, an emergency locator beacon, and a saltwater to freshwater converter. They also stocked the boat up with several months' worth of non-perishable food so they would never be stranded without supplies. Tom and Jackie loved the simple rhythm of life at sea. The quiet sunrises, the feeling of being untethered from the world. But as much as they loved their adventure, something even bigger was calling them back to land. In 2004, Tom's son Matt and his wife welcomed their first child, a baby boy named Jace. Suddenly being out at sea didn't seem as appealing to the first-time grandparents. They wanted to be there for all the little moments. The first steps, the birthdays, the Sunday dinners. So they made the decision to sell the Well Deserved and buy a home in either Arizona or nearby Mexico to be closer to their grandson. That decision would ultimately put them on a collision course with a literal boatload of monsters. Well Deserved had cost $290,000 to buy, and with all of the improvements, it owed the couple close to $500,000. It's not that easy to sell a boat in that price range, so Tom and Jackie were realistic about their prospects. They hoped to walk away with somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000, which would give them enough to buy a home near their grandson and a smaller boat so they could continue to pursue their passion for the open ocean. Not long after they listed the boat for sale, they were contacted by a man named Skylar Deleon. Skylar was born John Julius Jacobson Jr. Geez, say that 5 times fast. On August 12, 1979 in Sun Valley, California. His parents, Lynette and John Sr., were a young couple with anything but a stable relationship. John Sr., or Big Johnny as he was known, was a convicted drug dealer who had not only dragged 16-year-old Lynette into a world of chaos, but also got her hooked on drugs. When Lynette found out she was pregnant, she tried to get an abortion, but Big Johnny wouldn't let her. That had nothing to do with him wanting to be a father, he just wanted to be in control. If anything, John Sr. seemed to hate his son, just like everyone else around him. When John Jr. was in diapers, his father would beat him with a wooden spoon so hard that the spoon would break. When he was a toddler, his father regularly strangled the boy and slapped him across the face. Outside of violence, John Jr.'s entire childhood revolved around drugs. His father dealt while his mother used. She stopped doing drugs for a while when she found out she was pregnant, but after breastfeeding for a couple of months, she switched to a diet of cocaine and not much else. Big Johnny used the drugs and the violence to take complete control over his wife. Whenever she thought of leaving, he'd give her a hit or remind her that she'd be cut off from her supply if she ever left. When Big Johnny started consuming more drugs than he could pay for, he offered his wife as a payment method by forcing her to have threesomes and orgies with his suppliers. When that wasn't enough, John Sr. began manufacturing meth to sell to Colombian drug dealers and biker gangs. It was only when John Jr. started school that his mother Lynette decided it was time for them to leave Big Johnny for good. She was in the process of getting a restraining order when Johnny found where she was staying and strangled and stabbed her. She managed to break free and fled down the street carrying her child. John Sr. was eventually arrested, but he was given bail and released back home. Lynette was left with nowhere to go. Either she stayed with John and he kept beating her until he killed her, or she left and he tracked her down and killed her anyway. In the end, she decided to leave John Jr. behind and try the legal route to get custody of him. But John Sr. was ready to play that game too. He hired a lawyer who painted Lynette as a drug addict and unfit to be a mother. Eventually, she was given weekend visitation, but Big Johnny hardly let her see their child, and she was too scared of what he would do to her if she went back to court to fight for custody. In the end, the only time Lynette got to see John Jr. was when his father was busy on a drug run or with the various women he had relationships with. When she did see her son, he always had bruises and injuries from where his father had beaten him. There seemed to be no end to the level of pain Big Johnny would inflict on his son. When John Jr. began biting his nails, his father shoved toothpicks between the nail and the soft flesh underneath. When he caught his son biting his nails again, he would bite down on the toothpick in order to cause excruciating pain. John Jr. wasn't allowed to cry or react to the pain, otherwise he'd get beaten as well. Life for John Jr. was about as bad as it could get, but his father still managed to find a way to make it even worse. At around the age of 7 or 8, John's father began forcing him to sleep in his bed so he could molest him. He was also made to go over to the neighbor's house and get dressed up as a woman so the old man could take photos. John Jr. told his mother about the abuse, and she tried to stop them from having any contact, but she was no match for Big Johnny's violence. Big Johnny's girlfriends all seemed to know about the abuse, but none of them did anything to stop it. John Jr.'s only reprieve from his chaotic life was when his dad was sent to prison for drug trafficking. He was sent to live with Lynette, who had gotten married and was off drugs. But his time with Lynette only lasted a few months. As soon as Big Johnny was out, he demanded his son be returned. When John Jr. was a teenager, his father found a new way to make money off of him, that time through the big screen. Big Johnny enrolled him into an acting class and signed him up with an agency to do commercials for Nintendo, Hyundai, and Buick. At 14 years old, he appeared as an uncredited extra in the television series Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That 1990s show was about 5 teenage superheroes who used martial arts to fight evil in the fictional town of Angel Grove in California. That appearance was meant to be the stepping stone to a future in the limelight and an unlimited supply of cash for Big Johnny. But once again, he couldn't or wouldn't control his anger or his behavior. He would verbally and physically abuse John Jr. on set, and he was dropped by his agency. He never landed another role, which meant his acting career was over before it began. Even with all those people witnessing the violence that the minor experienced, it wasn't until he was in his mid-teens that CPS became involved. Neighbors reported hearing a child screaming, and when the social worker interviewed John Jr., he shared about the abuse he had experienced all his life. But for some reason that doesn't seem based off any sort of education when it comes to child behavior, the social worker invited Big Johnny to sit in on their next interview. That time, John Jr. gave an entirely different story. He said that he had never been hit and the bruises on his body came from the martial arts training he was having for his role on Power Rangers. The social worker thought that was a perfectly reasonable explanation and the case was closed. Over the next 3 years, there were more reports but no more investigations. At one point, Big Johnny even demanded CPS write him an apology letter for overstepping their bounds by questioning his parenting. John Jr. had no friends and no life outside of his father. The only person who seemed to have any interest in helping him was one of Big Johnny's ex-wives, Lisa, who kept an eye on him even after separating from his father. When he was in trouble at school for missing too many classes, she signed him up for private tutoring and helped him achieve his high school diploma. 5 months after graduation, at the age of 20, John Jr. enlisted in the Marine Corps, but his military career was even more short-lived than acting. Just 14 days after joining, he fled and was listed as having an unauthorized absence for 10 months. He was given an other-than-honorable discharge. A few months later, he changed his name to Skylar Deleon in hopes that a new name would give him a new identity, out from under the shadow of his father. Despite the effort, it seemed he could never sever the tie for long. Over the next few years, he spent time living with his father, his stepmother, and various people he met on the streets. Skylar managed to land jobs pretty easily, but he never kept them for more than a couple of months. Then something much more permanent came his way. In early 2002, Skylar met Jennifer Henderson in an online chat room. Jennifer was born into a middle-class family whose lives revolved around church and service to the community. She did well in school, was a member of the athletic and softball teams, and volunteered to go on missions to South America. The family didn't have a lot, but she never went without, and she was the apple of her parents' eyes. After high school, they supported Jennifer to enroll into a beauty course and become a hairdresser. When she brought Skylar home for the first time, her parents were impressed. He came across as a nice, sensible guy who seemed to have his life together. He told them he was an ex-Marine, and he showered Jennifer with gifts and fancy dinners. A couple of months into their relationship, though, Skylar sensed Jennifer starting to pull away from him. Her friends said they were moving too fast with their talk of marriage and starting a family. When she started to become more distant, Skylar knew he needed to do something drastic to keep her close. He borrowed a friend's motorbike to show off and ended up getting into an accident. From the hospital, he called Jennifer to say he had serious injuries and needed someone to look after him. Jennifer came running and she never left his side again. Although Skylar recovered from his injuries, the accident caused permanent damage to his bladder, which meant he had to wear an adult diaper. Just 6 months after they met online, Skylar and Jennifer got married in a small ceremony by the beach. Before Skylar had met Jennifer, and despite the ugliness of his childhood, his run-ins with the law were minor. There were a few small-time drug offenses and petty money schemes that never escalated into anything serious. He didn't use hard drugs or show signs of the violence he had grown up around. As for Jennifer, she had never displayed even a hint of malice or a tendency towards crime. If anything, she was the good girl, the responsible one, but when they came together, something shifted. It was like two seemingly harmless chemicals mixing to form a dangerous toxic reaction. Alone, they might have lived quiet, unremarkable lives, but together they became monsters. Not long after they were married, Jennifer found out she was pregnant with a daughter. Skylar didn't have stable employment, and they were living off of credit cards. A few months after their child was born, they agreed it made more sense to him to stay home with the baby rather than pay for a babysitter. It sounded like a practical decision, but the reality was that Skylar simply wasn't earning enough to cover their mounting expenses. Jennifer loved money. She loved the freedom, the status, and the security it brought. The problem was, Skylar didn't have any. The couple was drowning in credit card debt, and Skylar's financial irresponsibility only made things worse. Eventually, they borrowed $18,000 from Jennifer's parents, which Skylar said he was going to use to start a scuba diving business. He claimed that would turn their fortunes around. He bought a truck, a boat, and equipment, but never actually started the business. The money was gone, but the couple were no further ahead. So Skylar turned to crime to make ends meet. He got a job at mortgage lender Ditech and began scamming his colleagues. He even started breaking into their homes. One night, he was caught in the act and he was charged with armed burglary. Skylar was sentenced to a year in jail, but once again Jennifer's parents stepped in to save him. They agreed to pay $2,100 a month so Skylar could be released on a work furlough program during the week. Somehow, though, Skylar was able to work the system in such a way that he never actually went to his job. Instead, he would go home to look after his child or go out with his crew dealing drugs and running scams. By that point, home was the garage at Jennifer's parents' house in Long Beach. It wasn't exactly a choice, though. They simply couldn't afford anything better. And it wasn't a spacious garage conversion. It was a cramped, cold space filled with storage boxes and clutter. The kitchen and bathroom were in the main house and there was hardly any clear space for their belongings, let alone their child. Not long after their daughter was born, Jennifer found out she was pregnant with their second child, and Skylar was facing the prospect of being a stay-at-home, or more accurately, a stay-at-garage dad of two. Money was already tight, and as the years went by without his lifestyle improving, Skylar became increasingly obsessed with wealth and status. He would drive past the mansions of the rich and famous in nearby Hollywood and stew over the fact that he couldn't have more or be more. The life he wanted felt just out of reach. He felt that the world owed him, and when the universe didn't pay out, he decided to make his own fortune. On November 1st, 2004, Skylar contacted Tom Hawks to express his interest in buying the well-deserved. After a few messages back and forth, Tom invited him to visit the boat to see if it was what he was looking for. During that first visit, Tom and Jackie showed Skylar through the boat and explained all of its features. Skylar asked all the right questions, and he didn't seem put off by the high price they were trying to fetch. He told the couple that he'd made his fortune as a child actor on the Power Rangers and with real estate investments, and he was looking for his own next adventure with his wife and kids. After that first visit, Tom and Jackie told their friends that there was something off about Skylar. During his next visit, Skylar seemed to sense their caution, and he called his heavily pregnant wife to come down to the boat with their daughter. That seemed to put Tom and Jackie's minds at ease. After all, what kind of danger could they possibly be in from a young family expecting their second child? A few days and 2 visits later, Tom and Jackie agreed to Skylar's request to take the boat for a sea trial. It was the final stage of the boat sale process, and it also gave Skylar an opportunity to take a look under the hull. They agreed on a price of $450,000, which included the couple leaving all of their linens, cooking utensils, scuba equipment, and kayaks with the vessel. By that point, the couple were sure that Skylar would go through with the purchase. On November 11th, they planned a farewell party aboard the Well-Deserved with 2 of their sailing friends and Tom's brother Jim. They agreed to meet at Catalina Island, and that evening they raised their glasses in a toast to the boat and the cherished memories it had given them. They told their friends about Skylar and his family and how excited they were for the next stage of their lives as grandparents. They had ridden the waves of adventure, and now they were ready for calmer waters. During the party, Skylar called to confirm that the sea trial was going ahead on the 15th. Tom and Jackie always kept in regular contact with their friends and their boys, so when Tom's brother Jim didn't hear from him in the days after the boat sale was meant to take place, he thought it was odd, but he figured they'd just been too tied up in handing the boat over and clearing it out that they'd forgotten to call. Jim was an ex-police officer, though, and he couldn't get rid of the nagging feeling that something was wrong. A couple of days later, and after many unanswered calls, he got in contact with Tricia, who took care of the couple's affairs on land while they were at sea. She hadn't heard from them either, despite calling Tom multiple times about an upcoming VA medical appointment she had made for him. The next call he made was to Tom's son, Ryan. He hadn't heard from Tom or Jackie either, which was extremely out of character for both of them. Ever since his son Jace had been born, they had called multiple times every day just to hear his coos and giggles. It had even gotten to the point where Ryan had to tell his dad to give them a break so they could focus on being parents rather than answering calls all the time. Ryan told his uncle that he had last spoken to Tom and Jackie on the day of the sea trial. After that, there had been radio silence. He was trying to remain optimistic that his parents had simply gotten sidetracked in their excitement and had headed to Mexico to start looking for a house already. But deep down he knew something wasn't right. He had already tried emailing his parents and had gotten no reply, so he decided to Google Skylar Deleon and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The search turned up nothing. Jackie's parents were also getting concerned. Ever since she had been living on the boat, she called her mom every Sunday without fail, so when there was no call on November 21st, they knew something was wrong. After a week of everyone trying to track down Tom and Jackie any way they could, the family agreed that if they didn't hear from them by Thanksgiving on the 25th, they would report them missing. Jim was an ex-police chief, and everyone agreed it made the most sense for him to do the report. A couple of days before their deadline, Jim mentioned his concerns to a colleague from his old precinct. Together they drove to the Lido Isle Yacht Club in Newport Beach where the well-deserved was usually moored. And there it was, tied up exactly where they had expected, but Jim immediately noticed something was off about the boat. Tom and Jackie were extremely fastidious about looking after the well-deserved. There was never so much as a rope out of its place, but when Jim walked towards its mooring, he noticed that the green canvas cover used to protect it from the weather was tied on incorrectly. He also noticed a dirty towel hanging out of one of the portholes, which would have been a cardinal sin for Tom's boat. There was no sign of life on board, so Jim peered inside the cabin. As he approached the door, he noticed that the padlock wasn't the one he'd seen there just a few days earlier when they met at Catalina Island. Perhaps the most telling thing was that the dinghy's outboard motor was left submerged in the salt water. That was something Tom would have never done. All of that confirmed to Jim that the boat had changed ownership. There was just one thing that didn't sit right with his assessment. Years earlier, Tom's brother had gifted him a custom-made surfboard. It was one of his most prized possessions, and yet there it was still tied up on the deck, right where it always was. Jim knew that Tom would never have left it behind, at least not willingly. His gut was telling him something was very wrong, but with no answer to his knocks and no evidence of foul play, there wasn't a lot he could do. So he left a note on the cabin door saying he was looking for his brother and asking the new owner to contact him. Then he drove around the marina parking lot looking for any sign of Tom and Jackie's silver CRV, but he found none. Jim didn't know it then, but it would take years to unravel the truth of what had happened aboard the Well-Deserved. A truth that began the moment Skylar entered Tom and Jackie's lives. Around the time Jim was looking for his brother, Skylar and Jennifer told her parents that they had some exciting news to share. Skylar had just completed the paperwork on the purchase of a boat for them to live and work on. She asked her father Steve to pick up some cleaning supplies so they could prepare the boat for their move. It's not clear why he thought Skylar could afford a new boat, seeing as he lived in their garage and owed them more than $30,000, but he went along with it anyway. He picked up a roll of trash bags and some Clorox wipes from Target before driving to meet Skylar and Jennifer at the dock. They ferried Steve over to the Well-Deserved on the dinghy, and he couldn't help but feel impressed by its size. The couple asked him to clean out the galley while they took care of the staterooms. It was only after a few hours of cleaning that Steve began to wonder how exactly they had been able to get their hands on such a nice vessel which was clearly worth at least a couple of $100,000. When Steve asked Skylar and Jennifer about the boat, they told him it had been handed over by a man who owed Skylar a debt from his time dealing drugs. Steve knew Skylar had a past and had spent time in prison for burglary, but he believed it was all in the past. He also trusted that Jennifer wouldn't lie to him as she hadn't been raised that way. So Steve accepted their explanation without any questions. He didn't think twice when they casually mentioned that the old owner had thrown in a Honda CR-V along with the boat as part of the deal. A few days later, Skylar and Jennifer invited Steve to join them on a 24-hour fishing trip aboard the Well-Deserved. They didn't catch anything, but Steve noticed how excited Jennifer seemed about their new life on the boat. She spoke about their plans to live and work at sea, and Skylar enthusiastically described the adventures they'd have. It all seemed like the start of a promising new chapter for his daughter and her family. The next day, they asked Steve to join them on a drive down to Arizona so they could finish the paperwork they needed to transfer the ownership of the Well-Deserved. They told Steve they were under pressure and needed to get to the office before closing time, even though it was a 2-hour drive. In the end, they didn't make it, but they were first in line the next morning. When the admin was done, there was one final stop they needed to make. Jennifer and Skylar asked Steve to drop them at Stockman's Bank. At the counter, they requested a large withdrawal from the bank accounts of Tom and Jackie Hawks. When they were asked for ID, they handed over a power of attorney document which supposedly gave them full access to all accounts belonging to the couple. The document was signed and fingerprinted by Tom and Jackie, and it appeared to be legitimate, but the bank manager told the couple that they couldn't make a withdrawal without the signatures being certified by Tom and Jackie's main bank in Prescott. Skylar and Jennifer were forced to leave the bank empty-handed, but all was not lost. They still had the boat. The next time they went on board, they found Jim's note looking for information about his missing brother. Jennifer called him the next day. According to her, she and Skylar hadn't seen or heard from Tom or Jackie since the day of the sea trial. They had paid Tom cash for the boat and signed the change of ownership papers, and then the Hawks had driven off into the sunset in their Honda. She said that Tom and Jackie had promised to give them some lessons on the boat, but they hadn't been back in touch since then. When Jim asked why the couple's personal belongings were still on the boat, including Tom's prized surfboard, Jennifer said they agreed to leave everything for a couple of weeks until they had sorted out a house to move into. She promised Jim that if she heard anything from Tom or Jackie, she would let him know. Jennifer's explanation didn't sit right with Jim. It was as if Tom and Jackie had vanished off the face of the earth. They hadn't contacted friends or family, not even to check in about their grandchild. Jim's gut was telling him that Skylar and Jennifer knew more than they were letting on, but with no immediate evidence of foul play, there wasn't a lot he could do. Skylar and Jennifer were interviewed multiple times, but they stuck to their story about a cash purchase and the Hawks driving off in their Honda. When they were asked about the power of attorney documents, they said Tom and Jackie had willingly signed them over as part of the deal to simplify the transaction. But that didn't make sense either. Even a search of the Well-Deserved didn't turn up any clues. DNA traces of Tom and Jackie were found throughout the vessel, but there was no blood or signs of a struggle. There was simply nothing concrete to tie Skylar and Jennifer to any wrongdoing, and really no definitive sign that any wrongdoing had occurred in the first place. That was until they spoke to someone Skylar had named as a key witness to the boat's sale. Skylar claimed Alonzo had been on board during the sea trial and could corroborate everything they said about what happened that day. When detectives tracked Alonzo down, he did just that. He said he had been on the Well-Deserved for the sea trial and had helped Skylar put together the power of attorney documents. Tom and Jackie had taken the cash, got off the boat, and left the marina in their Honda. There were a couple of minor details in Alonzo's story that didn't add up, but when detectives asked to meet with him again, he disappeared and family members said he had gone to Mexico. By then, more than 3 months had passed with no word from Jackie and Tom. Their family members feared the worst without even really knowing just how bad the worst could be. In March of 2005, Alonzo got a case of the gilts and he returned to the United States to speak to detectives. That time he decided to tell the truth, which meant no more lies and no more protecting Skylar. He started by sharing how he and Skylar had met. Alonzo had been working as a junior prison guard when Skylar was sentenced on the burglary charges. They had become close and he would often cover for Skylar when he was on work furlough so that he could go home instead of work. There was a curfew for all prisoners, but Alonzo would let Skylar back into the prison after hours in exchange for money, or at least promises of it. During an 8-hour interview, Alonzo shared that once Skylar was released from prison, they kept in touch and met up regularly. Skylar was always on about some scheme or another to make a bunch of money, but Alonzo was sure none of them actually worked out. Except Skylar always had a way of making him feel like the next one was the big one. He drove a fancy F-150, which he'd fitted with custom mods. He also had a small boat stocked with scuba gear and carried plenty of cash. Skylar failed to mention that he was in more than $100,000 worth of credit card debt. It was in September of 2004 that Skylar first mentioned his plans to take over ownership of the Well-Deserved. He told Alonzo that he had seen the boat advertised in a magazine and had made contact with the owners to express his interest. Alonzo told the detectives that during one of Skylar's visits to the boat, he sensed that Tom and Jackie were a bit wary of him, so he called Jennifer to bring their daughter down to the dock to put their minds at ease and add credibility to his story. It worked. It only took a couple more visits and several phone calls to prove just how serious he was about buying the boat from them. After that, all he needed to do was secure a date for the sea trial. Once Tom agreed to November 15th, Skylar put his plan into action. In preparation for his day at sea, Skylar took Alonzo to purchase 2 stun guns and 2 pairs of handcuffs. After the final visit before the sea trial, Skylar said he needed a 3rd guy to provide the muscle and to help with the heavy lifting they had planned. Skylar asked his father to help, but Big Johnny said he didn't want to get involved because he didn't know if he could trust Alonzo. Instead, Skylar used his connections to make contact with a local guy who agreed to join them in exchange for a cut of the profits. Alonzo didn't know the man's name exactly, only that it was something like CJ or JT. The day before the sea trial, Skylar explained the plan to the extra man, whose name was CJ, and Alonzo in detail. He needed Tom and Jackie out of the picture, and the best way to do that was to get rid of them at sea. Skylar used photos he had taken on his visits to the boat to show his crew where he planned to restrain Tom and Jackie until they were far enough away from land or help. The plan was for Skylar and CJ to take Tom down to the main stateroom while Alonzo distracted Jackie in the galley. When the couple were incapacitated, Skylar would force them to sign a power of attorney document which would hand over control of all their bank accounts to him. Alonzo admitted that he was the one who had prepared the document for them to sign. Just as they had planned, Alonzo, Skylar, and CJ met with Tom and Jackie at the marina for the planned sea trial on the 15th. Skylar told the couple that CJ was his accountant and that he was joining them to make sure the boat was a worthy investment. Once on board, Tom set the heading for a spot just outside the harbor. Skylar joined him on the bridge while Jackie showed the others through the cabins. Once they were clear of the land, Skylar got into his scuba suit so he could go underneath the boat and check out the hull. Meanwhile, CJ told Jackie that he was feeling seasick and asked if he could have a lie down in the stateroom. When Skylar came back on board, he went down to the stateroom to get changed. Then he asked Tom to join him for a chat. While Alonzo kept Jackie entertained in the galley, CJ and Skylar used the stun gun to subdue Tom. He fought back, but he was no match for the 2 men. When Jackie heard 2 loud thumps from downstairs, she tried to move away from Alonzo, but he used the techniques he had learned from his time as a jailer to restrain her. Once she was in handcuffs, he walked her downstairs to join her husband. Skylar used duct tape from the engine room to cover the couple's eyes and mouths. Then he headed back up to the bridge and set the autopilot to take them to a few GPS waypoints, including one between Catalina Island and San Clemente Island. For the next few hours, Tom and Jackie laid on the bed fully restrained with only their fingertips able to touch. Once the sun went down, Skylar brought Jackie upstairs and removed the tape from her face. He put the power of attorney and boat ownership documents in front of her and told her that if she signed everything, he would let them both go. Jackie did as she was told. Then they brought Tom upstairs and went through the same process. He did as he was told too, but Skylar had no intention of letting Tom and Jackie go. Once the paperwork was signed, he took them to the back of the boat and used a rope to tie them together with Jackie's back to Tom's chest. He used another rope to tie them to the boat's second anchor. Then he opened a gate on the back railing and tossed the anchor over the side. Moments later, the couple were pulled from their position into the depths of the waters below. Tom and Jackie's heads had barely disappeared beneath the surface of the water when Skylar ordered his accomplices to erase every trace of the couple from the yacht. They tossed anything that could tie them to the murders overboard: the stun guns, the handcuffs, and the bloody bedding. As they headed back toward shore, Skylar called Jennifer twice to tell her that the plan had worked and he was on his way home. At 1 a.m. the next morning, the well-deserved returned to its dock at the yacht club and the three criminals went their separate ways. Skylar went back home to his pregnant wife and child, Alonzo to his parents' house, and CJ to his apartment. For the next few weeks, they went about their lives as if nothing had happened. With Alonzo's description of the mysterious third man known as CJ, detectives spoke to local gang members to try to put a name to his face. Eventually, they identified him as John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Yes, JFK. He was a member of the Long Beach Insane Crips with an extensive police record and time served for drugs and violent offenses. But in recent years, CJ seemed to have turned his life around and stayed out of trouble. He was a father of three who worked as a contractor for the gang intervention unit who helped troubled youth stay out of gangs. He was a regular volunteer at his church and was just 1 month away from becoming an ordained minister. And yet, for the promise of a couple $1,000s, CJ was more than willing to go out to sea with Skylar and kill 2 people. With Alonzo's confession, there was enough evidence to charge Skylar with 2 counts of murder. CJ was picked up a few days later and also charged with murder. After Skylar's arrest, his relationship with Jennifer remained intense and obsessive. Before he was charged with murder, she visited him in prison 34 times, usually with their kids in tow. They exchanged over 2,300 handwritten letters during that time, each of which was monitored and copied by investigators. Detectives always believed that Jennifer had played a key role in the planning of the murders and in the cover-up. Over the years of the investigation, her story had changed many times, but she was consistent in her refusal to implicate Skylar for any of the crimes he was charged with. Despite the growing mountain of evidence against him, no amount of pressure could break the loyalty she seemed to have to her husband. Even when detectives offered Jennifer an immunity deal, she refused to testify against him. That would prove to be a blessing in disguise. With Alonzo's testimony, they didn't need her testimony, and they had even more reason to go after her directly. He had told them that every step of Skylar's plan to kill the Hawks was crafted with Jennifer's input. She had been the one to turn up at the boat to put their minds at ease. She had come up with the idea to force Tom and Jackie to sign a power of attorney, and she was the one at the bank demanding the money from the victims' bank accounts. By the time Skylar was charged with murder, there was enough evidence to charge her as well, but detectives waited until she had delivered her second child before making the arrest. Even though Jennifer wasn't on the boat that day, she was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. A 5th man was also charged for his role in putting Skylar in contact with CJ. In the meantime, members of the Newport Beach Police Department coordinated efforts to try and find the bodies of Tom and Jackie Hawks. All they had to go on was a 2-mile area around one of the GPS locations Skylar plotted on the day of the murders. They used sonar equipment and an unmanned submarine to search the seabed, but sadly, that and subsequent searches didn't turn up any sign of the couple. Their bodies have never been found. But even without their remains, there was plenty of evidence in the case. There were 40,000 pages of discovery, 600 audio files, and 3,000 pieces of evidence. That included phone records for anyone with even a fleeting connection to Skylar. Those records showed him contacting his accomplices and the Hawks in the days leading up to the crime, as well as a flurry of activity that followed as he got rid of their belongings and transferred ownership of the well-deserved. There was also the CCTV footage of Skylar and Jennifer attempting to access Tom and Jackie's bank accounts in Arizona, and the couple's car had been found at an address in Mexico, with the occupants confessing that Skylar had gifted the vehicle to them. But one of the biggest revelations in the investigation was that Tom and Jackie's murders weren't Skylar and Jennifer's first victims. The way Skylar eliminated Tom and Jackie Hawks was about as inhumane and monstrous as possible. But in preparation for the trials, prosecutors presented evidence of a slaying from December of 2003, which had gone unsolved until the investigation into the Hawks murders in 2004. John Jarvie, or JP as he was known, was born in 1958 to Betty and Norman Anaheim, California. Growing up, JP was an intelligent kid with a taste for adventure. He loved to travel and fool around with his friends, but in high school he fell in with the wrong crowd and developed a taste for cocaine and heroin. His addiction introduced him to a dangerous network of criminals and also led to frequent run-ins with the law. Despite it all, JP overcame his addiction and graduated high school early. He promptly enrolled in flight school and earned his private pilot's license. With a few thousand hours under his belt, he got a job flying private jets for wealthy businessmen, but the high-flying lifestyle soon caught up with him. After undergoing neck and back surgery, he became addicted to prescription painkillers and soon relapsed into harder drugs again. After an incident at work, he lost his pilot's license and was relegated to life on terra firma. Betty tried unsuccessfully to convince her son to go to rehab, but JP was sure that he could kick the addiction on his own, and for a while he seemed to do just that. He tried a few different types of jobs, but when they didn't work out, he started jewelry making in his parents' family business. For a while, life was improving and it looked like JP was finally on the right track. When JP's father died in February of 2002, though, he fell into a deep depression. He stopped working and began trying all sorts of get-rich-quick schemes, from dealing drugs to shady investments. Right before Christmas of that year, he was arrested for his role in a counterfeiting operation. He served a few months in prison and was released in September of 2003. Less than 3 months later, on December 27th, JP's body was found on the side of the road in Ensenada, Mexico. His throat had been slit and it was clear he had survived for some time after the attack. A trail of blood led toward a rocky area hidden from view of the road, but no one else was around to offer help or witness what had happened. The investigation into JP's murder determined that he had died in a drug deal gone wrong. It was only after the investigation into Jackie and Tom's murder that the connection was made between JP and Skylar. They had shared a cell at the Shell Beach jail for 9 weeks. Less than 3 months was all it took for Skylar to learn all he needed to know about JP and all of the ways he could help in his own get-rich-quick scheme. When they were both free, Skylar made contact with JP and offered him the opportunity to invest in a Mexican business he was planning to open. He promised significant rewards, but only if JP could make an upfront payment of $50,000. Not long after, JP cashed out his 50% share of a condo his parents had purchased. Then he drove to meet Skylar in Ensenada to hand over the cash. The next day, he was dead. Phone records played a key role in linking Skylar to JP's murder. Investigators discovered that Skylar had been in regular contact with JP in the days leading up to the trip to Ensenada and then abruptly stopped the day after they met. Eyewitnesses saw the pair together on the day JP was murdered, and Skylar's vehicle was recorded crossing the border back into the United States a few hours later. Skylar hadn't wasted any time splashing around the cash he had stolen from JP. He made some upgrades to his F-150, paid off a credit card, and bought new scuba equipment as well as gifts for Jennifer and his daughter. When it came time for the trials to begin, all 5 defendants pleaded not guilty to the charges against them. Jennifer was the first to go to trial in November of 2006. The prosecutor hoped that by securing a conviction against Jennifer, there would be no room for doubt when it came to Skylar and the other 3 accused. By then, it was clear that her loyalties had changed. Jennifer's defense was basically that she was a good Christian woman who had been manipulated by Skylar. She was afraid for her life and went along with his plan, but she had no idea he intended to kill the Hawks before he went out on the boat that day. Despite that, the prosecution was able to present a strong case that Jennifer was involved in every aspect of the planning, execution, and cover-up of the murders. Skylar was in contact with her multiple times every single day, sometimes up to 100 calls in 24 hours. While there's no way to prove what they talked about, witnesses to the murders and Skylar's other schemes said he never did anything without her approval. After 7 days of evidence and just 4 hours of deliberation, Jennifer was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Jennifer appealed her conviction by complaining that she had inadequate counsel, but her objections were dismissed. In October of 2007, she was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. Skylar's trial didn't begin until October of 2008, 4 years after Tom and Jackie's murders. By then, the prosecutor had confirmed they would be seeking the death penalty. In the defense's opening statement, they made a shocking and highly unusual concession. They acknowledged there was no doubt Skylar was responsible for the murders of Tom and Jackie Hawks. They weren't going to try to absolve Skylar of the crime, but they were going to convince the jury that he didn't deserve to die for it. The defense argued that Skylar's actions were the result of a deeply troubled life. Of course. They painted a picture of a man who had endured relentless abuse throughout his childhood, particularly at the hands of his own father. John Sr. was rightfully portrayed as a violent, domineering figure who physically and sexually abused his son for years. The defense argued that those traumatic experiences had fundamentally warped Skylar's psyche, which left him incapable of making moral decisions. That strategy was an attempt to humanize Skylar and shift the focus from what he had done to why he had done it. They argued that his background of abuse and neglect made him a deeply flawed individual, but not someone who deserved the death penalty. Their view was that life in prison was a more appropriate punishment than execution. The prosecutor argued that Skylar's motive made it clear the 3 murders weren't simply the actions of a damaged person acting out of trauma. Instead, they were cold, calculated crimes driven by greed and self-interest. He and Jennifer were drowning in debt, but they craved the finer things in life: flashy cars, a yacht, and to never have to work for any of it. There was another layer to Skylar's motive, though. From a young age, he had expressed feelings of discomfort with his gender. He told Jennifer he had been born, quote, a hermaphrodite, which is when someone is born with both male and female reproductive organs, something more commonly referred to as intersex today. He then claimed to have been diagnosed with uterine cancer and that the only treatment was a gender reassignment surgery. Jennifer appears to have believed what Skylar told her, and she supported his desire to go ahead with the surgery. But plastic surgery costs money they didn't have. Just a couple of weeks before Jackie and Tom's murders, Skylar met with a surgeon to discuss the operation. They scheduled a date and paid a deposit with assurances that he was about to come into some money and would pay the remainder in a few weeks' time. During Skylar's trial, he appeared progressively more feminine. He also expressed a desire to be transferred to a women's prison. A few weeks before his trial began, he was found bleeding in his cell after attempting to cut off his own penis. Reviews of Skylar's medical records found no evidence he had been born intersex or had a cancer diagnosis. After 4 weeks of testimony, Skylar Deleon was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for financial gain and multiple victims. A month later, the jury recommended the death penalty, and in April of 2009, he was formally sentenced to death. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JC, was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and also sentenced to death. Alonzo pleaded guilty to 2 counts each of voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and robbery and was sentenced to 20 years and 4 months in prison. The man who connected Skylar and JC pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 1 year behind bars. Tom and Jackie Hawks deserved the life they had built, but not their fates. Skylar and his accomplices, on the other hand, deserve nothing but the title of monsters. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.